All right. Hello, people. Welcome back to Quibbles Over Coffee. Today we're talking about the media, the scary, scary media,
Terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. Yeah.
which I guess we are part of now.
I guess we are part of the media. I guess that's
Yeah.
fair. Yeah. In a small component. We're a
Yeah.
small component of the media, but we
Very
are indeed
small,
parts of the
scary.
media. Yeah. We're like a mini scary. We're like
Yeah. A baby
like a
scary.
beetle, you know? We're not like a true viper, but we're a beetle.
Right.
Little
Okay.
beetle.
So Jonah proposed the question. What's the question? Should media try to be nonpartisan? Slash, what's our or its role? Um, so yeah, I just think that's interesting because I feel like I've thought about it a little bit where people are like, oh, like, is this partisan? Like, do you think this is partisan? Like, oh, and I think clearly from like the past 4 years, we were able to tell like what side each news outlet is on. And I guess it can shift and change, but um, yeah, it's just been interesting discussion to see like, oh, should it be partisan? Like, what should its role be? Is it exclusively to give us the facts, or should it tell us what these things mean? Because I think once you get into what these things mean, that's when you start to get into the partisan debacle.
Hmm.
Yeah, but I feel like it's like I like when it tells me what it means, like like giving like just a headline of just like, oh, this is what happened. And it's like, cool. Like, what does that mean?
Therefore what? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think, increasingly, whether or not this is a good thing, which I think obviously we'll be unpacking, but I do think that increasingly we are getting to a media that is more openly partisan than the media of the past.
Right.
Like obviously CNN and MSNBC used to be pretty down the middle, and they no longer are. Fox used to be a little bit conservative. Now they are a lot conservative. Also Newsmax exists. Also OAN exists. Also Blaze TV exists. Also all of these different organizations, Daily Wire. And it's, there's no secret that these are clearly trying to push a particular political agenda. I'm just not sure what the implications of that are.
Yeah, I don't know either. I don't know very much about like media in general, but yeah, it does seem like there's been a shift in terms of like how conservative or how like progressive some like especially news outlets are. And to me, it just kind of seems like we kind of had this discussion before, but I think it's like we do want to have like the topic and have like someone explain that.
Right.
But it does seem like, especially in news outlets, it's more about this like narrative of fear. Like, how can we get like viewers afraid or angry? Like, how can we create like this kind of reactionary culture around media? And to me, it seems like on both sides, they kind of do that. I would say like more so on like OAN and Fox and things like that.
Yeah, I don't think there's an equivalent
structure completely.
Yeah.
But it's like, I don't know if we'll ever get away from partisan media, but in general, it's kind of like, how exactly are we responding to the topics being discussed? Are we doing this in like a reactionary mindset where we want people to get angry, but not be productive in that anger, just kind of get angry about it? Or are we like doing this in terms of like, this is what's going on. Like, these are ways we can address these things, I don't know. Like, to me, it just seems like partisan media is here to stay.
Yeah. Because the thing is that like, I'm not even, okay. Everyone says that they want to have the existence of a media place that is not partisan. I'm not entirely convinced that it's true that anyone actually wants that. Like we say we want it, but I don't think we do want it. because it's so much more fun to like watch Breitbart and go, "Rawr!" You know, the lefties are terrible, or you know, read Salon and just be like, "Rawr!" You know, like it's really it's a lot of fun to be extraordinarily partisan. And the other thing is, I'm not entirely sure that nonpartisan media could exist. I mean, like there are certain, like just in terms of the language that you use, right? Like, okay, let's talk about Israel Palestine for a second. I just said something. I just by calling it Israel Palestine, I pissed off a bunch of people who want me to only call it Palestine, and I pissed off a bunch of people who want me to only call it Israel. Simply by I literally haven't started the conversation, and I've already pissed people off. Right? I can't say, like, when I say, you know, black people versus African American, just saying those words has an implication, right? And so like there's no I don't even understand what it would mean to try to be nonpartisan, really.
Yeah, and I don't think it needs to be nonpartisan because I mean, like you said, there's going to be like emotions tied to like how you frame things, like you know, like you said, Israeli Palestine. It's like, yeah, there's a lot loaded into that. Like you just see that title and you can get upset, or you see that title and you're like, yeah, I want to know about this, which that is actually a good thing. You can use that to like get more people on and view like your content or your media or whatever. But I think it's like what you do with that when you have people on. Like when you have people on is like, are we going to have a whole hour segment about why it's okay, you know, like to exclude Palestine in conversations, like, or like, do we want to use that time to like discuss like Israeli-Palestinian conflict, where that came from, what people are doing about it, you know, like, you know, maybe having people on both sides discussing this or whatever, and like have them kind of come at it if they want in a partisan way, but at least like kind of showing everybody's input in that and not necessarily trying to steer a narrative that can like cause confusion or cause just an emotional response without kind of anything to tie that to, you know? So it's just kind of like, I think it's okay to have like, you know, grabbing titles or like having like topics that are controversial, you know, because that's always going to exist and it's always good ratings, you know, and in the media, you need that. You need the ratings, you need people tuning in.
Sure.
But it's like, you know, how do you handle that? And I just think that like, yeah, it's just kind of like, what can we like make people afraid of? Like, and what can we make people angry about? But they don't even know why they're angry or afraid. They're just angry and afraid, and it's just being pumped in. And it's just kind of like, I don't know, like the whole caravan thing. Like, it's just like, oh, there's a caravan of immigrants coming. You should be scared, you know? And it's like, okay, I'm angry and scared, but why? Like, why am I angry and scared?
That's another whole like component of it. Like, it's not even just about how you cover stories. It's about which stories are you going to even bother to cover? Because the truth is that like, yeah, I mean, the caravan is a great example. That is not a real issue. Like we're talking about literally, by the time they got to the border, it was like, what was it? 200 people? Like, I'm sorry. That is not a conversation worth having. Like it just genuinely doesn't matter at all. And so like comparing that to, I mean, like every single day, literally more people are dying than died in 9/11 of coronavirus right now. And so, you know, that's like, yes, from a media perspective, like it's not, I mean, we're obviously having a conversation today and today we have not talked about coronavirus at all up until when I just said it right there. And so like, it's not, you know, even we're guilty of this. It's not that we're only talking about the most important issues. We're talking about the issues that are also most interesting. And it's very difficult to sort of unpack that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the media's goal is to make money. And to make money, you have to use people's fear and uncertainty, because that will get them to keep coming back. Because if they're afraid of it, oh, is there an update? Like, what else is going on with the story? How is this unfolding? And that's kind of what they need, because they need money and they need to keep getting your money. and they need to keep getting your money. And so they're going to focus on the things that are getting the most clicks, are the most interesting, are doing all these different things that may not be the best for you as the consumer or us as the country, but is what's going to get them to the next financial quarter, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a way to get? Oh, I'm sorry. Go for it. My fault.
No, finish what you were gonna ask.
Is there a way to get around the economic incentives of media? Is there a way to try to figure out a way to make it so that we don't have the same incentives that obviously we right now are dealing with?
I don't know if I have the expertise to answer that question because I feel like there's just so much more that goes into like the business side of media that I just have no idea about. But I mean, like, I don't think that we need to have a media outlet that's just like talking about, I don't know, like cute little ducks or like, you know, people saving people from dangerous situations. I mean, yeah, like those are fun, like those are needed too, like a little palate cleanser or something, but we don't need to have like light, fluffy, cute media. Like we can have like discussions about dark topics and we can have discussions about things that are affecting, you know, Americans every day. But it's like, I don't know. And also it might also be because of the structure of media that's kind of outdated. Because I feel like and I don't know, because social media is kind of like this too, and social media does kind of you know, stir fear and anger out of people too, but that's part of like the algorithm. So I'm trying to like figure out if like media itself influenced social media to be like that, or if this is just human nature, you know, and it's just kind of like, it just goes with what human nature is.
Yeah.
So maybe like we in general as humans should just like, you know, start bringing importance to things that may not be as interesting, you know, and try to make them accessible or try to make them interesting. You know, like if we want to talk about coronavirus and we want to talk about how many people are dying compared to how many people died on 9/11, like every day, then we can make some kind of like fear-based, like clickbaity type title about that, like without even at first even saying like this is coronavirus. It could be like, you know, this many people are dying every day and it's like, see what this is or something, and then people click it and then you're like, hey, this is coronavirus is killing this many people a day and like you really should pay attention to this. So I think we can use shady tactics like that, but like use it in a way that's like still educating people about what's going on. So I don't think that we need to like completely get rid of that. I think there's still a place for that, but like how you're using that, you know, effectively. Because I mean, yeah, they might be getting ratings or whatever, but it does affect people. And you know, it's just kind of like, I think you can still be successful as a media outlet and like push content or push things that people need to know about. You just got to be more creative about it. You know? Like,
But I think the Trump era has raised an issue when it comes to that, where media outlets are now getting people who say radical things and who like get people to like think like clickbaity type of people, really, and put them on the shows and like try and have civic discussions with them. But it just doesn't work because they're not that kind of person. But in you doing that, you kind of give them the platform and the legitimacy of a real news person. And to everyone else who's watching doesn't really understand the difference. And they'll just be like, okay, well, I saw him on, I don't know, Chuck Todd's show. And so like, I believe him, you know? And it's like, I think it'll be hard to stay because then they also want to stay like, oh, we're not partisan here. There's a Republican person. but then they need a Republican person who's going to get them ratings. And so they get like the pillow guy or whatever. And it's like
Mike Lindell, yeah.
It's like you're giving him this platform is not going to help. It's not going to A, make you seem less partisan, and B, it's not going to, you're not going to get your message across, and then it's just going to end up hurting a lot more people than it is helping.
Yeah. But failing to have any conservatives on results in not having any conservatives in your audience.
Right.
Not having any conservatives in your audience means that the quality of your advocacy really declines a great deal.
Yeah.
I think a lot about the like the old climate change debates they would have on television, where essentially the idea of an issue and kind of defaulting to the belief like because two people disagree on an issue that both sides have like legitimate grievances or disagreements.
Right.
So we should put these people on television and they can hash it out or whatever, despite the fact that there really isn't like a legitimate argument against the existence of climate change. Or it would be like, I guess a modern equivalent would be like having a QAnon debate or something on primetime news, where it's like you have a QAnon and arguing with like a sociology professor or something. And it's like, it's just something that no one would probably agree should happen and would probably be actively damaging, right? To platform that belief, because even if 5% of people watching, they say, hey, that person makes sense to me, you know, that's millions of people that suddenly subscribe to like a dangerous ideology, and then they're raising their kids with that kind of ideology and their community.
Spread it to their friends and whatever.
Yeah. Well, there's sort of a, so I agree that having like these debates with like QAnon supporters, and this is not just something that happens on like, you know, these giant media, CNN type places. This is also something that's happening constantly on Twitch, right? Destiny, Vouch, whoever you want to think of, Vosh, Vouch, whatever it is. And so like all of these people are constantly talking to conservatives, and I think it's a reasonable criticism to say that by platforming them, that they're getting their message out to a larger group of people. But it's also true that you're getting your message out to a larger group of people than you otherwise would. And it's also true that pointing out the absurdity of some of the views of the far right, I think is important work to be done, because the truth is the majority of people in this country are neither really left wing or really right wing. They're mostly just not all that interested at all in politics.
Right.
And showing that absurdity of the right wing, I think, is important in convincing people that actually this is an important enough issue that you should be, getting serious about and thinking about it more deeply. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that it is important. Even if you're like, well, I don't want to give this person a platform, you can at least give them enough of a platform for them to kind of show like how stupid like their argument is.
Yeah.
And of course, there's always going to be people who are like, oh yeah, that's completely right. I completely subscribe to that. But, I think like in Destiny's case, at least, he does have people who are on, and he gives them a platform to voice what they, believe in. But at the same time, he doesn't give them the leeway. Like he does hold them accountable to what they are believing, and will be like, well, why do you believe why did you say that? Or like, can you explain to me why this makes sense to you? Because it's not accurate, and like actually calling them out on it. And I think that that's also valuable, because there's so many people, I'm sure, who watch Destiny who probably subscribe to what that other person was saying. And then they see them eat shit on like a stream,
annihilated,
and they're like, this isn't cool anymore. Like, I don't like this person.
It's like, wait a second, you're actually dumb, like extraordinarily stupid. Yeah.
So, I mean, that is needed. That's definitely needed. You don't want to be so like nonpartisan that you're like, well, I don't want to like, or you don't want to be, even if you are partisan, you don't want to be like, oh, I don't want to bring someone on who has a different viewpoint, because then I'm going to give them a platform. Like, give them enough of a platform to just spout their nonsense, but then call them out on it,
Yeah, it's definitely it's a lot more difficult to do like the Destiny kind of content than what we're doing right now, which is sort of a much more polite and less sort of aggressive conversation. I do think that there's a component of like the Destiny Vosh culture of like debating far right people that I think is perhaps not quite as productive as it could be, because when you go into a conversation like that being a jerk, like you get a jerky response, right? Like people are more willing perhaps to make space for disagreement and make space for agreement even with people across the aisle if you go into it with that jerky attitude. But I also think that like part of the reason that they're so successful, part of the reason they're able to get the audiences that they are, is because they're able to play into the same sort of like destroys kind of culture that a Ben Shapiro does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there's a place for that, but there's also a place for people to do this in a more gentler or more loving way. I mean, yeah, like you can have discussions with people who are extremely radical and you don't have to agree with them, and you can still have conversations with them, and like possibly get to them, or at least just show them like, hey, like what you're thinking is problematic and here's the reason why, and step by step going through that process, instead of like, oh, you're fucking stupid, like
Right.
this is why you're stupid. You don't have to do that
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
There is a space for that because there is an audience that benefits from that. But I think there should be more channels, especially on Twitch, of people who are doing it differently and like doing the same kind of conversations, but like, hey, I'm not here to like destroy you. I'm here to like understand why you think this way and also tell you why it's problematic.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. The issue though is that like if you're open to, like, I agree that we should have more spaces where people can come in and speak about these things. But if you come in from the perspective that I'm right and you're wrong, I think it kind of will devolve into that eventually.
Problem is that I am right and they are wrong.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
That's
well,
the problem.
it's like a debate, right? Like you need to hold your own. Like you do need to have proof or reasoning as to why you think that what they are subscribing to is problematic or whatever. And at the end of the day, I mean, I think another thing is a lot of people go into these discussions thinking, well, I need to win them over. And it's like, you can go into this discussion and not change them at all. Like they could just be exactly the same, believe the exact same thing, but you had the conversation, so it may not be that you changed that person, but you may have changed somebody who watched. So it's like, we don't have to go in with the mindset of, I need to have this victory, I need to have this win. You just want to go in with like, okay, this person's willing to come in and have a discussion with me. I'm going to take this time to understand where they're coming from and then also tell them where I'm coming from. And if we don't get anything out of this, it's fine, because I mean, we at least were able to have a space where we could discuss this without fighting with each other, So.
Yeah, it's interesting because like the sort of the yelling at each other kind of component of it makes it very difficult for people to admit that they lost, right? Like there are a lot of, I mean, I can't think of a single time that Destiny has had a debate and at the end of it, someone was like, oh, actually, like, yeah, I agree, Like it's very difficult in the moment once someone gets sufficiently aggressive to admit that you're wrong, even once it becomes abundantly clear that you are wrong. And so I'm curious, like, do you think that people are getting to admit that they're wrong after the fact, or do you think that it sort of ingrains them even more so in their ways, even if it doesn't? Because there's sort of like two components. Like yeah, I want to convince the audience the day of, but it's also true that like particularly when you're talking to a large content creator, you do underlying, like, it would be really great if we could convince Sargon of Akkad to stop being an asshole, because like Sargon of Akkad is talking to whatever it is, 200,000 people a day, and if we were able to convince him to change his messaging, that could probably have much larger implications than destroying him on an individual afternoon in front of, even if it's 500,000 people. for that one afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, you could even have like a type of discussion where it's like, okay, at the end of this, I have a little contract, like here's a contract that, you won't be an asshole anymore. Are you going to sign this contract in front of all these people? And you could say, no, I don't want to sign it. Or, yeah, I guess I'll sign it. And at least you have like that, fact that they did it, instead of being like, destroying them and like, oh, you fucking lost. Go crawl back into your hole, you fucking loser,
Right.
So I think like, yeah, you could do something funny like that. Like, oh, are you going to wear the promise ring of faith that you are not going to believe in these things anymore?
Yeah. Got to start thinking about trade deals. Yeah.
But like, yeah,
I'll stop being dumb about abortion if you stop being dumb about minimum wage, and then
yeah, like so it could be funny that way, where it's like a kind of like trade deal type thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, at the end of the day, like, I know that if I was to do something like that, I am not going to convince everyone of what I believe, no matter how much I like scream at them or like give them any kind of scientific facts or statistics or whatever. They're going to believe what they're going to believe. And it could be that maybe, I get to them and they're like, yeah, like it doesn't make sense. Or it could be later that they're like, I thought about it more and I'm feeling like this isn't making sense for me. Or it could be that they double down on it and they won't let up because they're not willing to think about, what they're thinking and introspect.
Or they make money from it.
So at that point, they're already so far into it that they can't ever change because it's not part of their brand. Right. So, yeah, like that's not really something that I can do. That's up to them. But I can give them the tools to change if they want, like I can help them in that process if they want to, but they have to be willing to, like I can't beat them into being a liberal, like
yeah,
doesn't work.
If only, yeah.
I think a lot of times with the bigger figures like Sargon or what's that one, Lauren Southern, just people like that, like getting them, because most of the content they produce is, like slickly scripted content or edited content, and then getting them into a live space where for the first time someone can ask them a question and they have to answer it. Like that. At that point, getting them on is less about changing their mind and more about like just giving people that watch their content the ability to see what they're like outside of the content they produce. Like, can they back up what they have said in the past for these reasons? Like we listened to that. The New York Times did a series called, I think it's Rabbit Hole or Down the Rabbit Hole, about like YouTube radicalization, where like the algorithm like repeatedly shows you like super long like related political content. So like you're just consuming like the same content over and over again, and then one day like the guy that the story was about was specifically mentioning Destiny, and that he was watching all this Lauren Southern content, and then he got recommended the Lauren Southern Destiny debate or discussion because the algorithm was like, you want to see Lauren Southern content, here's content with Lauren Southern in it.
Right.
Where, she looks like a fool and can't like back up any of the stuff she was saying in her videos or whatever. And then suddenly like your whole thing switches, and now you're in this kind of like position where you can keep consuming that type of content, where these people that used to have these highly produced videos with big budgets are now kind of on their back heels, and they don't look, as intelligent as they were made out to be, or their arguments aren't standing up to these questions that I never even thought of, because why would I think of them? I'm just watching this video and I'm consuming it like uncritically.
Right. Yeah, sure.
So I think it depends like when it comes to platforming, it's like who is being platformed, like what are their ideas? Like for the climate change thing, there really isn't any worth in the debate at this point. But if there was like,
there's worth in the question of like what kind of solutions do we have to,
for sure,
to
yeah.
climate change? Yeah, that's definitely worthwhile.
But if there, it would be worthwhile. It's not worthwhile just in any old debate, but if there was like a channel with 1 million subscribers that was just like straight up, you know, denying climate change or whatever through whatever method, and you could get them out, like essentially you're getting them out of the video and getting them into a live stream, like being in front of people live, no editing, and showing essentially what they really are.
Yeah, the no editing I think is really important. I do think that the live, particularly on Twitch, there's an implication of having a live chat that I think is worth unpacking, because like there's, on the one hand, it means that every time that I have a question, snap, I can just like ask the question and there will be 7 links in the thing, and admittedly only, you know, half of the 7 will be moderately helpful, and only one of the 7 will be actually helpful, and the other ones will just be like links to porn. But like, you know, it's there's a sort of a value there, and there's a larger home front advantage when you're like a Destiny figure, of just having that giant chat. But I also think that the implication is that it makes it almost definitionally more aggressive than what you can get to when you're not in a live content. Because like, yeah, like there's every time that you know, a right winger gets in a room with a left winger, every left winger in the chat is screaming about how awful the right winger is, and every right winger is screaming about how awful the left winger is. And like, I don't know if that's all that helpful in terms of even just the audience, beyond the implications of how the content creators themselves are interacting.
Right.
Yeah. And I think like, yeah, that's where like you do kind of have a responsibility to create that space in your community. And like, hey, we're having this person on, we're not going to be making this into a like attacking kind of environment. Like, we're going to hear them out. And like, we're like, of course, you know, there's going to be people in the chat who are going to try and do what they want to. That's where you can moderate if you want to, and whatever. But, you know, like if you want to create that space, then you can, you know, you just have to actively create that space. And, you know, you can still have discussions with like right-wing people, and kind of put them in an environment where it's like, you know, that we're just having a discussion, you know, like we're just having a discussion. It's not like you can calm down a little bit. You don't have to be on your guard. I'm not going to ask you any trick questions. Let's just have a discussion because I want to understand where you're coming from, you know, and you can have it that way. Or you can have it like, you know, maybe if you want to kind of be like Destiny, and have a debate or whatever, you can at least maybe, I don't know, like I said, just kind of try to create a space of like, you know, like we are going to have a debate and whatever, but, you know, we're going to like behave a certain way during this process, and like at least let the other person know before they come on, like what to expect. I don't know if Destiny does this or not, but it's kind of like,
depends on who it is. Yeah. Sometimes he does. Sometimes he's more of an asshole. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like, I mean, I'm going to be asking you these questions. I mean, you can even give them the questions beforehand. And if they want to have a canned response, they can. But in the discussion, it's going to be transparent. It's going to be live. So when you're having more of that discussion, you can ask more questions to get out of them, like what their actual belief is or whatever. So, I mean, you can kind of create a space where they don't feel like they need to be on guard, like right when they come on.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. These are all just like such high stake conversations. Like, I mean, like, you know, the implications of messing up an interview between left-wing person and other left-wing person, just not like, there's just no implication to that, because like the audience that each of the two left-wing content creators represent is just not one that's going to be like radicalized and convinced by the opposite side, and therefore like we lose left-wingers to a bunch of like alt-right crazy stuff. But when you're talking to Nick Fuentes, as Destiny has in the past, like that's a white supremacist, straight up white supremacist, like the violent kind, not the underlying bigotry kind, but like the literal violent white supremacy. I definitely don't want to see, I'm not going to name names, but there are a lot of left-wingers whose content and ability to hold their own would not stand up next to Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes would destroy them, not because Nick Fuentes is right, but because Nick Fuentes is really good at debate, really good at that sort of like, kind of bullying, antic, whatever you want to call it, context. And it's very dangerous when people platform unresponsibly.
Yeah. And at that point too, like we do need to have boundaries. It's like, who do I want to give a platform? Who don't I? Because like, like you said, if you've got a violent white like supremacist on your like live stream, it's kind of like, what are the pros and cons of this? Like, I may be able to get some people on my side, but at the same time, I'm platforming this person, and it could possibly like be something that is like a negative response to this. So like, let me weigh those pros and cons, and maybe like I can get somebody on that is like a softer version of this person. And that might be like a better person to debate with, or like maybe I shouldn't have people on who are white supremacists that we all know is like clearly white supremacy or whatever. But it's just like having those boundaries, because at some point, like if you are going to have people on like neo-Nazis or white supremacists or alt-right or whatever, like how much are you actually doing to like actually
you have to be ready.
Dismantle them, because at this point it's like you are giving them a platform. So
I don't think it's like, in my view, I don't think it's necessarily about like who I am not willing to have on the show. I think it's much more about like, who am I not able to handle, right? Like, because you have to be able, because like I am confident. I mean, we had a conversation about with Daily Blend, obviously, that you may have watched or may not. But in that conversation, I'm pretty confident that anyone who is listening, who's not yet taken a side and listened to our conversation about like whether or not the election was stolen, probably took our side, because we pretty handedly beat him on that conversation. But there are other conversations which like, I just don't know enough about the situation, and I don't know enough about like what they believe. Like I couldn't have a QAnon debate because I don't know enough. I genuinely just don't know enough about QAnon yet to be able to handle myself in front of someone who's, an expert on, these conspiracies.
Yeah. But then I think also that would be a chance to actually talk to them in a way of like, hey, like human to human, what is QAnon? What is going on with that? Like, can you discuss with me like what you do in support of QAnon? Why do you do this? Whatever. And it's like, just learning from them, like how they got into this, what QAnon is doing, because you do still want to know what they're doing, and like have that insight, especially from someone who's in it. And then like, have a discussion on it, or you can debate them. Of course, I think at this point, it would be more of just a discussion about like, what QAnon is, like, what does this mean? What does this mean? And then talking to them about like why I don't believe in QAnon, and like, why QAnon is problematic or whatever. They may not want to listen, but at the same time, it's like, I'm giving you the space to talk about what you're passionate about and what you believe in. So, I mean, you can at least hear what I'm passionate about and what I believe in too. And we may not come out of this conversation with you believing what I believe, but at least I know what you're believing and like how I could possibly, steer people away from that. Like I have more information about it, that I know, like, how QAnon is operating. I know because I'm speaking to those people, like how they're getting into it. And I can kind of like weave my conversations with other people about like, this is what QAnon does to get you like hooked into it, whatever, and I'm having these conversations with actual QAnon members about like how they got into it. So it doesn't have to just be the conversation itself. You can use that conversation to get more information about that person and their ideology, and then also use that for, just informing people in your audience or informing just other people in general who may not know about it at all, what it is. And I think that's super helpful too, because there's so many people, especially with QAnon, where their family members are getting into some weird shit and they're like, I don't know what this is. Like,
sure.
Yeah. And they're like, my uncle is saying some weird stuff. I don't know what that is, like, whatever. And, they could be like watching your Twitch stream, and then you mention something like that. And they're like, oh, this is QAnon. Like, this is QAnon stuff. Like, I need to like know about this. I need to be aware of this.
Sure. Yeah. All right. I feel like that sums up our this particular discussion.
Yeah.
Houston, any other thoughts?
No. I just think it's interesting. I never would have considered speaking with someone like that just about what they think. But I mean that makes total sense. I think if you want to know, I think if you have the prior knowledge, I think you need prior knowledge. I think you need to know about it before, like generally, and then you can talk with someone about the specifics. But I mean, yeah, I think that's a good idea. So,
cool.
Yeah. I guess that's it for this one. We should have been doing this all along, but what?
Well, you should be shouting yourselves out. Yeah.
I know. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Think
I'm so
about
sorry.
that.
You didn't do that in the previous
Really
ones. Yeah.
sorry.
All right, shout yourselves out. Who are you?
Yeah. What are your thingies?
Yeah. So I am Harper Harps, and you can find me on Twitch TV /HarpZdarp, ZEDARP. And yeah. What about you?
And I'm on Twitch at MERTONTON.
Cool. I'm sorry that the guest thing on the top only says Mertanton and not also you. My fault.
That's okay. Yeah, I literally just like got a Twitch account 2 days ago. So
cool. Awesome. Looking forward to your content. Yeah.
Nice to have you join the fray. We are obviously Quibbles Over Coffee. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok,
and Quibbles C on Twitter.
Yeah.
Right up there. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode.